Hey, this is Kevin Yield, author of Ultimate Hockey Training, and we're back for the third and final video. Make sure you stick it out to the end because I have a special announcement for you. But before we get to that, I want to do a quick recap of some of the things we went through in the previous two videos. In the first video, we went through a speed training system that is the best transfer to on-ice gains. This is hands down the number one question I get from players, parents, and coaches because, as I mentioned, speed is by far the most highly coveted physical attribute of hockey development. In that video, we went through what most hockey players are doing wrong with their speed training and why, the difference between agility training and transitional speed training, how to progress linear, lateral, and transitional speed exercises, and how speed training fits into a more comprehensive program. In the second video, we dove into the complexities of conditioning for hockey, identifying that conditioning for hockey is really just preparing the body to avoid or delay fatigue. We identified what cardiorespiratory local muscular neurofatigue are and how they affect on-ice performance, the 5 most important considerations when designing hockey conditioning programs, why players shouldn't be conditioning on bikes in the off-season, the difference between static and dynamic fatigue, and finally, a static fatigue conditioning progression that anyone can implement because it doesn't require equipment. If you haven't had an opportunity to watch one or both of these videos, I encourage you to do so later. But for now, let's move into how to design hockey training programs. What may have been lost in the other videos is the complementarity of the various components of a good hockey training program. Every aspect of a training program should complement every other physical quality. This is why it's so important for players to follow a comprehensive training program and not only do traditional speed training or only focus on conditioning. I want to go through a few specific examples, but before we do, let's take a look at what I mean by a comprehensive program. The exact makeup of any program is going to depend on a number of factors, including the age of the player, their training background, and the time of year. But almost without exception, hockey training programs should have components that address soft tissue quality, static flexibility, joint mobility, dynamic movement pattern quality, linear and transitional acceleration, lower body power, rotational power, single leg stability and strength, dissociated upper body strength, multi-directional core strength and endurance, and finally, static and dynamic fatigue delay. Again, this is every program, so even if a player's only goal is to improve speed, all of these things need to be present in the program because all of these attributes complement each other. Now let's go back to these examples. If the goal is to improve speed, we absolutely need to improve strength. Speed is ultimately limited by the body's ability to put force into the ground, or if we're talking about skating, into the ice. When players improve their leg and hip strength, they can put more force into each stride, which will help them skate faster. Improving strength can also lead to improved conditioning in a couple of different ways, but let's highlight one. In order for a player to maintain their knee and hip bend to stay in a good skating position, they need to use a certain amount of lower body strength. Assuming that the player's body and equipment weight stays the same, the amount of strength that they'll need to maintain this position will also stay the same. Let's just say that this requires 50 units of force to keep a good knee and hip bend. Now, if the player's maximum strength in this pattern is 75 units, the 50 required to stay in this position is 2/3 or about 67% of their max. Now, if the player improves his lower body strength so that his new maximum capacity is 100 units, the 50 required to keep the good skating position is only 50% of his max. So if you think about which situation is going to lead to the player being able to maintain a good skating position for a longer period of time, it's obvious that using a lower proportion of maximum capacity is more easily sustainable. Now, this is an overly simplistic example, and I'm using arbitrary force or strength measurements here, but it illustrates the way that the body works. The same can be said for speed and conditioning. There are times in a game that require players to skate at specific speeds to get in the right positions and win races to loose pucks. If these speeds are near the player's maximum, they'll fatigue quickly. On the other hand, if these speeds are at a lower percentage of the player's maximum speed, they won't tire as quickly. In this way, improving maximum speed can also positively influence conditioning. And these are just a few examples of how improving one physical attribute can positively influence other physical attributes. It's all about capacity. The higher a player's capacity, or the closer a player's capacity is to optimal in any physical attribute, the more successful he'll be on the ice. And because every physical attribute complements each other, they all need to be trained. My friend Eric Cressy uses a really good analogy to help explain this concept. I want you to picture a glass half filled with water. Think of a player's overall physical capacity as the glass, and the water in the glass representing his current level of maximum speed. Doing things like running sprints and improving technique will help add water to the glass. In other words, it will help maximize the player's speed within his current capacity. This isn't necessarily a bad approach because it helps improve the player's performance, but ultimately the amount the player can improve will be limited by his capacity or the size of the glass. Once the glass is full of water, the player's improvement is capped. In contrast, a comprehensive training approach with all the components I mentioned earlier will increase both the amount of water and the size of the glass. In other words, it will improve the player's performance and their capacity to improve. This is what we want. We want a huge, constantly expanding glass, and we want massive amounts of water pouring into it. Isolating training variables like only doing speed training will compromise training gains. A comprehensive approach gets us our waterfall. Unfortunately, this is easier said than done. Looking back to what, at a bare minimum, needs to be included in a comprehensive program, this is a long list of training variables, many of which you may not be completely familiar with. Then you need to consider how to manipulate all these variables depending on the needs of the player and the time of year. This adds questions like how frequently they should train, what the focus of any given training session should be, what exercises they should use, how they should load them, how many sets and reps, what kind of rest intervals, and lastly, what happens if they're working around an injury. It's a lot to consider, and when you take a step back and look at everything that goes into writing a good program, it can be a bit confusing. I think this is one of the major reasons why so many players default back to just running sprints and going for jogs, or other really basic training strategies. They either don't know what else they should be doing, or don't know how to implement everything together into a coherent program. If you don't consider yourself an expert in designing hockey training programs, you're certainly not alone. There are over 965,000 registered hockey players in North America alone that are in your same situation, and hockey is one of the world's fastest growing sports. Even if you train athletes for a living, there still may be things about hockey specifically that you just don't know. And training is an absolutely essential part of the hockey development process at every level. Pee-wees need to train, and so do pros. It's not just about improving performance, it's about decreasing injury risk and making sure players stay on the ice for the whole season. Every week I get emails with training questions from people at every stage of the hockey development continuum from all over the world, from parents of square players to NHL strength coaches. Sometimes they're as simple as, should my son or daughter be training yet? And sometimes they're complex questions on how to address a player with chronic groin strains or hip impingement. The problem is that there isn't a single resource that has answers to all of these questions. There's nothing that describes the ideal long-term hockey development model and provides age-specific training guidelines. Nothing that outlines the current misconceptions driving common hockey training practices, like how to avoid downfalls of traditional off-ice warm-ups, why most players shouldn't be doing core exercises like sit-ups, leg throwdowns, and supermans, and how aerobic training can actually impair a player's performance. Nothing that presents an easily understood step-by-step training system, something with information that both someone new to off-ice training and someone that trains players for a living could pick up and start applying right away. There's nothing that outlines specific, real-world, proven training strategies to improve on-ice performance. At least there wasn't. I've spent the last year compiling the most complete hockey training resource available today. This is the first time that a comprehensive, step-by-step hockey training system is available that can accommodate the wide-ranging needs of the entire hockey development community, from players with no training background to professional hockey strength coaches. And because you've stuck with me through these videos, I have a really special opportunity for you. I've arranged to have a copy of Ultimate Hockey Training sent to you at a ridiculously reduced rate, and if you act today, I'm going to throw in 6 completely free gifts from some of the world's leading experts in hockey development and performance training. Even better, the entire package is backed by a 60-day, 100% money-back guarantee, so you have 2 full months to go through everything and test it for yourself at absolutely no risk to you at all. But you have to act now. Go check out the page below to see what the Ultimate Hockey Training System is all about and to take advantage of this incredible opportunity today.